let's talk for a moment about the reaction. You travel the world as much as anybody I know. True or untrue that fairly recently, when U.S. intelligence said, well, we have some indication that some terrorists are up to something, the U.S. fleet in the Mediterranean was put to sea, U.S. Marines training in Jordan saddled up and were told to get out of there very quickly because we have a break coming up. What's the effect of this on, in geopolitical terms around the world?
Well, we stand sentry. That really is the image. We stand sentry in a world that in many ways depends on us and resents us at the same time. That is the inescapable dilemma of American power at this time. We stand sentry. We guard the sea lanes of the Persian Gulf. We are dominant there. We keep the oil flowing. We maintain the security of Western Europe. And then there is all these attacks and all these challenges to this power.
You are watching continuing CBS News coverage of the attack on America. Dan Rather with Fuad Ajami in New York. Fuad, we were talking about this symbolism is regarded by those who carry out these terrorist attacks as very important. You pointed out earlier, no coincidence that they chose a symbol of American economic power, the World Trade Center, a symbol of American military power by attacking with this hijacked plane, the Pentagon. But the symbolism, and I heard myself, you confirmed that you heard, any number of people overseas, some in leadership positions saying, I'm not saying it's wrong, I am saying the United States has to think carefully when it does things like it receives an intelligence report and it puts its ships at sea, pulls out its Marines. Now I'm asking you, around the world today, this is a victory, one, it catches my throat to say it, but it's a victory for the terrorists today, cowardly as they are, dastardly, ghastly acted it is, a victory for them in real terms. They've killed Americans, they've damaged these symbols. What is it in symbolic terms?
Well, we're the great optimists, and the rest of the world, in a way, is tugging at us. And in a way, the relationship between success, which we represent economically and militarily, and failure is an unhappy relation. And consider as well that if someone like Osama bin Laden, let's say it's bin Laden and his freelancers who've done this, that Osama bin Laden could do this to American power and to American prestige, and that our president would have to go to some other, to some base somewhere in the heartland of the country because Washington, D.C. itself is dangerous. I think, there is a kind of a sense of glee and satisfaction that's derived in many, many societies and among many people who are poor, who are radicalized, who are resentful. And it is the fate of power to be envied, to be admired, and to be resented at the same time. This is our destiny. This is the American destiny today.
And in terms of terrorism, there is the tyranny of the weak.
Yes, of course. I mean, terrorism is the great equalizer. All our defense budget, all our great scientific power, all the systems we put in place, they were penetrated, as we know, by four, again, as to the extent that we can tell and to the extent we can read in advance, by four young people who actually were willing, as Bob Orr said, these systems were built on the premise that people don't want to die. If people want to die, these results can be obtained.
This now, President Bush, we are now told, is about to leave Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska to return to Washington, D.C. This is the second time today that they've said he'd be returning to Washington, D.C. So we shall see, but that is the unofficial word, as I get it, as we get it here at CBS, from Nebraska, that the president, having gone from Florida to Louisiana to Nebraska, is now at least intending to return to Washington, D.C. David Martin, our national security correspondent, is ready to talk about what the U.S. is doing nationally and internationally as we speak. David?
Well, Dan, all these movements by the president are part of moving him around from alternate command post to alternate command post. All of this a precaution against the possibility that these attacks aren't over, that there will be additional attacks. And that's why, for instance, that the U.S. military has put all of its bases on the highest state of alert. And that is why the Pentagon has ordered aircraft carriers to New York City, amphibious ships to New York City, cruisers and destroyers to Washington. They'll be there to help in the cleanup, to serve as floating hospitals, but also to serve as air defense for these cities which have already been hit by air attacks. We have a helicopter right overhead. I apologize if it's hard to hear me.
All right, David, go right ahead.
All of this is, the first order of business here is to protect yourself against further attack. The second order of business is to dig out from the last attack. And the third order of business is to find out who did it and do something about it. Obviously, we are not very far along the road of finding out who did it or in formulating a plan for retaliation. But no military officer I've spoken to today has any doubt that if a culprit can be identified, there will be a military retaliation. This is viewed quite simply as an act of war against the United States.
David Martin is our national security correspondent. I don't know of anybody in print or broadcast who has better sources among in the intelligence and defense communities. There have been conflicting reports. On the one hand, we've been told today by several people, including New York City Mayor Giuliani, and very recently, I think one of the senators said, look, we had no idea this was coming. On the other hand, there have been repeated reports in recent weeks, and I would say over, let's say, the last 6 weeks, that some terrorist somewhere was planning something because, among other things, part of the U.S. fleet was put to sea in the Mediterranean. The Marines were withdrawn from an exercise in Jordan. And indeed, there were calls from officials in intelligence agencies, which I don't feel free to talk about the details, but to journalists even, saying, look, something is up, but if you know how we came by this information, please don't talk about it. Now, that's on the one hand. On the other hand, is contrasted with these reports today, well, we had no idea this was coming. Try to sort this out for our viewers.
Well, this is the constant problem you have of this noise level of threats all over the world of varying degrees of credibility, and you have to pay attention to all of them because, of course, the one you don't pay attention to could be the real threat. And so the U.S. for months now has been reacting to intelligence that it has picked up about the possibility of an attack here or an attack there. There was, according to the intelligence officials that we've talked to so far, no intelligence that indicated anybody was planning anything like a coordinated air attack against sites like the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. That does not mean, however, that when people go back over all the intelligence that's been collected for the past several months, they won't find little clues here and there, which if they had put them in the proper perspective at the time, might have been a tip-off to this attack. And I am sure one of the things that's going to happen as a result of today's attacks is a major increase in intelligence spending because, of course, everybody will want to know why the U.S. spends $25 billion a year on intelligence, yet cannot pick up what was obviously a well-coordinated and very large conspiracy to attack these installations.
Well, David Martin, no doubt a lot of viewers will be saying that's a pretty good question. Dateline New York City, from where we're broadcasting, there are reports now that 2 more buildings at the World Trade Center complex, 2 more buildings of the World Trade Center complex are burning and are in danger of collapsing now.
Tell them to come back.
The fire is said to be in buildings 7 and 5. Buildings 7 and 5 of the World Trade Center. This morning, Trade Center towers 1 and 2 were hit by airplanes and then collapsed. For those of you familiar with Lower Manhattan and the World Trade Center complex, a huge complex, there are a total, well, I should say there were a total of 7 buildings at the World Trade Center. 2 of those, the 2 towers, are gone, obliterated. Now, buildings 7 and 5 are said to be burning and in danger of collapsing. Mayor Giuliani referred to this a little earlier, in fact, quite a bit earlier in the day, but he did not identify the buildings. Now, for those of you who just may be joining us in progress, 2,100 people are known to have been injured in the collapse of the World Trade Center building. There are no figures available on how many people have been killed and other people wounded. The mayor of the city, Mayor Giuliani, has said that the loss of life will be, quote, in his words, tremendous, but we do not know. We don't really have any idea the extent of loss of life, and it may be quite a while. Some people are still said to be trapped in the debris, and efforts have been made to find those people still alive and wounded in the debris of the World Trade Center. No figures available on the number of people killed and or wounded, in the hijacked plane attack on the Pentagon. Now, Barbara Olson, wife of the Solicitor General of the United States, Ted Olson, is reported to have been on the plane that crashed into the Pentagon. You may recall Ted Olson was prominent in the news as he helped President Bush in his secure the election effort in Florida, and is now Ted Olson was named Solicitor General of the United States as President Bush came into office. His wife, an attorney and very well. No further. David Martin has more at the Pentagon. David?
Dan, there has been one persistent rumor throughout the day that fourth airliner which crashed in Pennsylvania was actually shot down by a U.S. military jet. And about a half an hour ago, a Pentagon spokesman categorically denied that, said it did not happen. So that's perhaps one rumor that we can put to rest.
David Martin at the Pentagon. Let me show you a view of the New York City skyline from just across the river, the Hudson River. This is the view from New Jersey. You know, many people go to New Jersey for a look at what was the magnificent skyline at New York City. And if you're over there today, this is what you see. This is on videotape, but this is a favorite view of Manhattan, Lower Manhattan, which had the tallest buildings in the World Trade Center, the Empire State Building being at more mid-Manhattan, if you will. One wants to pause, take a breath. What a day. What a time. Another day that will no doubt live in infamy, in history, and the story is still developing. Now, if you're at home saying, well, I'm hearing a lot, but I'm not getting a lot of facts, let me say to you that the facts are few. We don't know how many people have been killed in New York, or for that matter in Washington. Many more in New York than in Washington, and the nature of things being what they were. We don't know how many people have been injured. 2,100 was the last actual injury figure, and everybody said, you know, that's just the early figure. What we do know, we have reporters on the scene. New York hospitals in and out of the area around the World Trade Center have been inundated with casualties. Doctors, hour after hour, have been doing triage work. Triage meaning deciding who should be treated and who can afford to wait later. This is the live picture of Air Force One leaving off at Air Force Base in Nebraska. President Bush reportedly headed back to Washington. We've noted before, we note to you again that he was headed back to Washington earlier today when he left Florida, but we are told on advice of the Secret Service, among others, the decision was made to take him to Louisiana instead. From Louisiana, went to Nebraska. Now, as you see, as Air Force One heads east, the president is said to be headed back to the White House, as had been mentioned several times. In terms of symbolism, obviously it would be desirable to have the President of the United States in the White House and spend this night in the White House. But of course, national security and the President's security comes first. Bill Plant is at the White House. Bill?
Dan, actually, they won't let us near the White House just yet. We hope to get back there soon. There are a couple of ways the President could get back. He may be on that plane, and we think he is coming to Washington. He could also take one of the other many planes in the fleet. At this point, you can be certain that the Secret Service is doing all that it can to maintain maximum, if you will, flexibility so that nobody can be certain where the President is. You know, I was reminded earlier today, there is a couple of times a year an exercise at the White House which all White House staff members have to take part in. And it is an emergency evacuation exercise timed for a crisis, such as the one that happened today. And in the past, and I've watched this over the years, some people take it lightly. And yet, when it happened, when something like today happens, the people were evacuated, the grounds were evacuated, and apparently the people who needed to go to the command bunker, the Situation Room beneath the White House, went there successfully. And now we expect that the President will want to spend, as you said, the night in the White House because he doesn't want to look like he's in hiding. That's probably the last thing this administration or any other wants after an attack such as the one which happened today. And Dan, in the category of putting rumors to rest, let's just repeat that there was a rumor earlier today that there had been an aircraft which struck near the Camp David presidential retreat in Maryland's mountains. That is categorically not true, we are told, and it may have been confusion with the airliner that went down in Pennsylvania. So we await the arrival of the president. We hope to get back to the White House ourselves so that we can watch the process of government and the process of getting to manage, getting their arms around this enormous tragedy. Let me just show you, if you would like, another late newspaper extra. This one from the Washington Post. The headline says, "Terror hits Pentagon and World Trade Center." Dan?
Bill Plant in our Washington bureau, not at the White House. Bill is one of the most experienced White House correspondents anywhere, but he's confined to the bureau for the moment. Now, to clear up this business about Camp David, and yes, we mentioned earlier in the morning what had been passed along to Jim Stewart from a high-ranking FBI official that was believed that a hijacked plane had crashed somewhere near the presidential retreat in Camp David, Maryland. If you look on your map, we're talking about a rather confined area of the Northeast when we talk about Washington, Maryland, Camp David, Pennsylvania. Now, to sort of straighten this out as best we can, apparently United Airlines Flight 93, bound from Newark, New Jersey to San Francisco with 38 passengers and 7 crew. This plane was hijacked, and while it was in the process of being hijacked, the FBI, operating on evidence from the FAA, believed that the plane had gone down somewhere near Camp David. Instead, it apparently went down in Somerset County in western Pennsylvania. That's about 80 miles from Pittsburgh. So here's the deal on the aircraft. About 7:45 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11, Boston to Los Angeles, takes off. United Flight 175, Boston to Los Angeles, takes off at 7:58. United Flight 93, Newark to San Francisco, all these West Coast bound flights. In fact, all of these West Coast bound flights, that took off about 8:01 a.m. American Flight 77 took off about 8:10 a.m. Dulles to Los Angeles was its schedule. Now, apparently American Flight 11 was the first to hit the World Trade Center. Then United Flight 175 was the second to hit the World Trade Center. And then that American Flight 77, this is a scene of that plane, the United Flight 175, hitting the World Trade Tower, the second to hit it. Then American Flight 77, the one from Dulles to Los Angeles, that plane hit near the Pentagon, and then the United Flight 93, Newark, New Jersey to San Francisco, went down in Somerset County in western Pennsylvania. And as Bill Plant just said, that this clears up the business about Camp David. Scratch Camp David off the list, that while it was widely believed and it was reported that a plane had crashed near Camp David, apparently that hijacked plane went down in western Pennsylvania. It's understandable under the circumstances, as sort of the geography got a little bit off on that report. Now, we have more pictures coming in from more places about what happened in lower Manhattan today, and I want to show you a montage of pictures. In the backdrop of this, there are at least 2,100 people wounded. That was just the early count, 1,500 walking wounded. The wounded figure is bound to go up considerably as you look at the effects of the collapse of the World Trade Center. How many people are dead? No one knows. Both the mayor of New York and various police spokesmen have said we should brace for the possibility that many, many people are dead as a result of this. And frankly, it's hard to imagine that they aren't. Although, as we pointed out earlier, people inside the World Trade Center towers, many people kept their heads, and as soon as they realized something was wrong, began to get out. Heroic New York firemen and policemen and many other workaday heroic New Yorkers helped in getting people out of the building, leading people out of the building. And so many lives were saved, but unquestionably many were lost. You look at this debris. Mind you, heavy steel beams, heavy concrete, marble, as well as steel and iron crashing down from 110 stories up in a ball of fire and explosion. It will be a long time, many, many hours, if not indeed days, before any reasonable assessment of how many people were actually killed and wounded here in New York. Now, in the Pentagon, where there was one plane crashed into one section of the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., as we reported earlier, the Defense Department said there's some fatalities there. We know not how many, and some wounded, but nothing on the scale of the World Trade Center here. Let's go back to Bob Orr in our Washington Bureau. Bob?
Dan, there's one very interesting thing that we have just learned, and it's about the plane that crashed in Pennsylvania. This may turn out to give investigators their best information as to who was behind these attacks and what their motive really was. This is very interesting. This plane took off, as we watch the pictures in New York, this plane took off at 8 o'clock, 8:01 to be precise, from Newark to San Francisco. But it didn't crash until 10:20. Now, this is a horrifying thing to think about if you know that that airplane was in the air more than 2 hours. The other thing is, just a short time ago, I got to take a look at the radar track of this particular airplane, and it's quite striking. As it takes off from Newark, it does exactly what you would think it would do. It heads west across Pennsylvania. It goes across northeastern Ohio, gets all the way to Lake Erie up off of Cleveland, when it suddenly does a U-turn and heads back towards the East Coast. Now, we don't know what led to the crash. We did hear from the Pentagon that there were rumors that the plane may have been shot down. Pentagon says that those are not true. There was no military intervention to bring any of the planes down. But the plane crashed in a rural Pennsylvania field. Very important point here. That means the cockpit voice recorder on that plane should be readily recoverable. And that's important because the cockpit voice recorder will record the last 30 minutes of whatever was going on in the cockpit. So if the plane was commandeered, as we believe, if there were things like gunshots or screams or any kind of threats being made, that will tell investigators exactly what was going on. And I've been told by sources that it is a top priority tonight for U.S. investigators to retrieve that cockpit voice tape and try to unravel part of what happened today. Dan?
Bob Orr, in our Washington Bureau, President Bush is said to be flying from Nebraska back to Washington, D.C. Whether or not he intends to actually spend the night in the White House is undetermined, unannounced. We'll keep you posted as time goes along. Sandra Hughes, our CBS News correspondent, is and has been for some time at Los Angeles International Airport at LAX. Sandra Hughes. Sandra?
Dan, we can't get back inside Los Angeles International Airport. It is being evacuated, and they've cordoned off an area, a pretty wide area around the airport. What we understand right now is that the FBI is inside right now, making sure everyone adheres to that evacuation order. Fire trucks, police cars, emergency vehicles have been flying by us with their sirens and their lights on, heading into the airport. What we understand is a suspicious package was found near the international terminal, but officials say that it has been dealt with. A little while before that, another suspicious package found at a nearby power plant. It turned out to be nothing. But I think what this is saying, Dan, is that there's a heightened sense of alert here in Los Angeles. People are suspicious of things they see, and that's to be expected. Oddly enough, when I was inside the airport, some of the passengers I talked to who were not able to board their flight said that this was not going to have an impact on whether they fly again, that this was not going to give them a heightened sense of anxiety when they fly. But Dan, even though we were not directly hit by these horrendous acts of terrorism here in California, with 4 of those flights en route to California, there are going to be many, many victims here, and the folks in this state are going to be dealing with it for a long time. Dan.
Sandra Hughes at LAX in Los Angeles. Our CBS News coverage is originating at our World News headquarters here in New York, but we have correspondents worldwide, and we've concentrated our coverage on Lower Manhattan, where the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center have collapsed. I'm going to turn to Fuad Ajami. Before I do that, Fuad, Dateline Berlin, the United States put its forces on alert as governments worldwide held crisis meetings. Security has been tightened at embassies, airports, and public buildings and braced for more possible attacks. That a Dateline by Reuters out of Berlin. But Fuad Ajami, Johns Hopkins University, we talked, look, nobody knows. We will say another time, we can't say it too often. Nobody knows who's responsible for these attacks. There have been accusations once again about Osama bin Laden. Nobody knows. But in terms of those states, which is by their deeds, not their words, the deeds, have demonstrated that they are capable of aiding and abetting and hiding terrorists. Let's tick them off. Okay. We're talking about state.
Were 92 people on board.
It does not appear that there's any kind of an effort up there yet. Now remember, oh my God.
Oh my God.
That looks like a second plane.
I did
not see a plane go in.
Minutes later, the second plane, the second tower. The fireball ate up the aircraft. It was a United Airlines flight, a 767 from Boston to Los Angeles. There had been 65 people on board.
I was happened to look on the first tower, and I actually saw people waving where the first plane crashed through, and then it was unbelievable seeing this second jet come crashing into the second tower. What is going on?
New York City was staggered.
As soon as it got hit, I was thrown to a window. So I was very lucky to get out. There's a lot of people that didn't get out. There's a lot of people coming down the stairs, burnt up. It's bad.
And still it wasn't over. This was the southern tower falling in on itself. It was now roughly an hour since the first attack. Meanwhile, it was beginning here in Washington. Another hijacked plane hits the Pentagon.
U.S. officials are saying there was no warning, no indicators of any kind of a likely terrorist attack. Number two, they say Pentagon officials within the intelligence and the counterterrorism offices are now looking at this very intensely.
ABC reporters across the city are beginning to hear the word terrorism.
It seems obvious unofficially to people here that it was a terrorist attack, but they obviously can't reach any firm conclusions at this point. So the Pentagon is engaged, and I'm sure law enforcement is, but they say they had no warnings.
Report piles on report.
Okay, there's been an explosion of some kind that shook the grounds of the Capitol. We all heard it. Everybody ran for cover. We don't know where it was. We don't see the smoke yet. Everybody's saying get back. We're running. We're running. We're running. We're running. They're screaming at us to get back.
On television, it looked like it was happening all over. 10:28 a.m., New York City, and in the shadow of the one remaining tower, a snatch of conversation between a reporter and a rescuer.
Why are they pulling us out of here?
Because the tower is leaning.
The north tower is leaning.
Broadway.
Right, Marty, quick. Oh my God, there it goes!
I looked up as soon as we got across the street. I looked up, I saw the tower start to buckle. I just turned and ran, ducked down, put a jacket over my head. 3 or 4 of us huddled together, and it was just black everywhere.
Washington, the White House is evacuated.
The Office of Personnel Management says all federal office buildings in the Washington area have been evacuated and closed. The employees sent home immediately.
The evacuation order creates instant gridlock in downtown Washington. The president was not in the city. He was in Florida visiting a school.
Today, we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country.
Officials at this end are not confirming that the president's plane is going to Andrews. We don't know if it's going to Andrews or some other location. All they've said is that he will convene a National Security Council meeting, and we don't know where that will take place either. Obviously, they want to keep a lot of people guessing as to the president's whereabouts.
Now it was lunchtime, and yet more terrible news is coming in. Another United airliner with 45 people on board has crashed south of Pittsburgh, presumably another victim of terrorism.
We talked to a couple of people who actually witnessed the plane going down and said it was quite devastating. Went right down into the woods. They saw all sorts of debris flying out into the woods and into the trees, and it's quite a devastating scene from what we're told.
At this point, it is hard to believe we're still in the same day that began with this picture. National Guard units are out. Washington is shut down. Airports in the U.S. and Canada are closed. And the death toll, still uncountable, is also unimaginable. John Donvan, ABC News, Washington.
Excellent report from John Donvan, pulling together this day, which has so much immediacy, so much history, such magnitude to it, and touches every American. And as I turn around on occasion to look at the computer screen behind me, I find emails coming in from people in other countries, Canada and Europe included, from friends and from families and colleagues, all expressing this deep empathy and sympathy for people here today who had friends and acquaintances, but just seeming at whatever distance to appreciate what is happening, even though they were not close to it. We're now joined by a young man who was very close to it again. This is Evan Fairbanks. He's a freelance photographer. Interestingly enough, you and I were just talking about journalists' emotions at a time like this, and the last thing journalists can afford to do is to fall prey to their emotions at a time like this, because it's too hard in the middle of a story. But you were very close this morning and photographing on assignment for a church when things began to happen. So we're going to show your videotape, if we may, though. Are you principally a still photographer? Or both?
Still and video.
Okay. Can we just look at what your first video is and explain it to us?
I walked out of Trinity Church after we had a blackout in our studio, and one of the studio managers grabbed one of our cameras when we knew what was happening. And I went out and was shooting aftermath.
Good God.
And I suddenly saw a plane flying into my viewfinder and said, gee, it's kind of close for that to be here now, and then realized what happened.
Yeah.
And
we'll run this again, because I think this is, will we run that again, Roger Goodman? That's Roger Goodman, our director, because this is, we've seen footage before of people on the run, and I understand that that's your shadow as you went by a storefront.
Yeah, actually it was. It's the first time I've seen that.
And was there absolute panic immediately?
Instantly. It was just pandemonium. Nobody knew what to do. There was no clear thinking. People were just reacting to kind of save themselves and the people around them.
You're in the same location when the building comes down.
I had been taken downstairs by Port Authority police who knew that I had this videotape, and we were moving actually to go back to the Trinity Church to make them a dub of the tape in a format that they could use on a VHS tape. And suddenly I heard one of the guys say, hey, Evan, watch out.
Hang on just a second. If you look in the upper, this now is frozen. And this is an angle of this attack that we have not seen before. At the top of the building on your left, out of the left, will come the building. And watch how the aircraft penetrates the building. Go ahead. Completely in one side and out the other.
It just disappeared. It disappeared like a bad special effect. It disappeared right into the building. I've seen it 6, 7 times now. It's still incomprehensible what is actually happening there. You're right. As a journalist, you have to take yourself away from it, and I'm still not there yet. And the more and more I see it, and as time goes by.
The modern technology enables us to see horror just as we are able to see sport in a variety of different speeds, or at a variety of different speeds. And I think you now have a better appreciation than we have had up until now, for which we thank you, Evan, because we see exactly how determined somebody was to do this horrible damage, taking a plane so powerfully and so fast in one side of the building, other. Tell me more what it's been like for you today as working the street.
It's numbing. It's like being in the fourth dimension. It's like it's not even New York City where it's happening. Nothing is normal. People are just walking in a daze up and down the streets. Nobody knows where to go. I just feel kind of this nervous, anxious buzz, and still unfathomable.
Trinity Church, one of the oldest, I think the oldest Episcopal church, certainly in this part of the world, certainly the oldest in the city, on the edge of Wall Street there. Was it being used? Did people come to it for any subsequent occasion?
We were only shooting a kind of a teleconference up in the 4th floor TV studio there. And we were all sitting in the studio about an hour before our airtime, and there was the lights went out for a second, they flickered. And we kind of joked with the studio guys that they had just put in a new studio and said, hey, you guys better watch out for that. That's not normal. And then within 10 seconds, people came running in and said that the Trade Center had been hit. They tried to call a production meeting and ask people to stay in the building, and people were just kind of fleeing. And I grabbed my still camera and was going to run out, not really heeding what anybody was saying there, knowing what was happening outside and feeling the need to be there. And one of the guys came out of the studio with a camera and was putting a tape in it, and I just grabbed it and ran.
And we saw the shadow of you running across the street. What was you afraid of, principally, as you were running?
I was afraid that I was going to be rained upon by whatever was coming off the building. So I knew that I had a few seconds to get basically an establishing shot, and then I had to look out for myself. And I ran. I was on the southeast corner of the plaza. I'm not sure exactly what building is there. and I just went around the corner a little south on Church and just got underneath the car and pointed the camera up into the sky and stayed there for a while, and then came out after a few minutes when the debris stopped raining so heavily, and I went around the corner and was pulled under an overhang by a couple of Port Authority police, to whom I immediately mentioned what I had shot, and they just grabbed me and whisked me down into the Port Authority police headquarters, and we were leaving there to go back to Trinity Church to make a dub of the tape, when suddenly the Tower 2, the top collapsed, and I just looked up and saw from basically 2 blocks away this reverse mushroom cloud coming down at me.
I know I said earlier, it looked like a banana suddenly being peeled. It's extraordinary.
When I've seen shots of the collapse from far away, and I just can't believe that I was actually there and walked away. I mean, I had to dive underneath. I ran backwards with the camera just pointed behind me, away from the scene, and saw that, you know, have heard about clouds enveloping people and oxygen being depleted, and I just dove under the biggest emergency response vehicle that I could see, stayed there for about 30 seconds, saw nothing but pitch black. I started having difficulty breathing. I thought my oxygen was starting to dwindle, and there was a moment when I said, well, this might be it. And my only chance is to get out and start walking north.
Well, we're very grateful to you. Very grateful you're okay, and that you took these photographs and that you shared them with the public. They're very dramatic. I needn't tell you that, but I'm very grateful to you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Nice to see you. Evan Fairbank. He's a freelance photographer who was working in Trinity Church today on the edge of Wall Street today when he and his colleagues on a production shoot in a church saw these 2 extraordinary scenes from, to put it directly, from a different angle, because we have seen it so many times, but this is the most dramatic angle we have seen this plane flying at the top of that building. It's quite extraordinary. I want to go to Washington very briefly, because we said the president was on his way, we believe, to Washington from Nebraska, and ABC's Claire Shipman is there, and I gather, Claire, the president wants to talk to the nation again.
Indeed, he does. He is on his way back to Washington at this point. We're told he does plan to address the nation tonight, but we don't have a time for that. We're told that he feels very strongly about this. People who've been with him say he's been angry and upset about what happened, and he very much wants to express it. We're also told, Peter, that the congressional leadership is on its way back to Washington, or will be very shortly, from its safe haven, and that those leaders, a combination of the congressional leaders, will also be addressing the nation tonight. There's apparently a real premium here from the leadership in Washington on presenting a face of business as usual. There have been a lot of security concerns presented to everybody about coming back to the nation's capital, but everybody has said, we want to show that the government is up and running, and that's what's most important to us, so try to minimize the risks. So it looks like a lot of people will be back. A couple of little notes about the president's return. We're told it's likely he will land, as he usually does, at Andrews Air Force Base. They think the airspace here is probably the safest in the nation right now. They're not sure they want him to chopper to the White House, though. They don't feel so comfortable about that. He makes
to save lives and to help the victims of these attacks. Make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts. I've been in regular contact with the lives and to help the victims of these attacks. Make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts. I've been in regular contact with the Vice President, Secretary of Defense, the National Security Team, and my cabinet. We have taken all appropriate security precautions to protect the American people. Our military at home and around the world is on high alert status, and we have taken the necessary security precautions to continue the functions of your
One tower collapsed, then another. This now home video footage we want to show you.
I live. I hope I live. It's coming down on me. Here it comes. I'm getting behind a car. It's incredible. Okay, I'm gonna have to go find people who need help, because I don't think I'm one of them. You okay, sir? Okay. Can I just get a toot off your respirator? Yeah. Can I get a toot? I'm just seeing a couple of clean breaths. That's good. Okay. Back to you.
It is a terrifying scene. We are told by those who operate the World Trade Center that this morning, shortly before 9 a.m. Eastern Time, when the first plane slammed into one of the towers, that the building was at full capacity, meaning that somewhere around 50,000 people were inside those two towers. We don't know a number yet of how many people were hurt. There you see the second plane slamming into the second tower. It did not take long for a chain reaction of events, including a massive fire inside each tower, to occur. And then one tower collapsed, then the other. Now we know that part of the World Trade Center complex, Building 7, is also on fire at this hour. It is in danger of collapse. We have a correspondent there. We will be checking with him. There is also a tremendous disaster all around Lower Manhattan. 10,000 or more emergency rescue personnel have been brought in. They've been called in. All taxi cabs in New York City have been commandeered to ferry rescue workers down to that area. At the same time, the Navy has dispatched a number of ships to New York Harbor to help with the rescue operation. Hospital emergency rooms around the city and beyond completely in chaos.
We are going to go momentarily to a former ambassador to NATO, but before we go to Ambassador Robert Hunter, let me introduce on the phone Kelly Quill, who was an eyewitness to both Kelly Quayle. I'm sorry, Kelly. Coyle. Kelly Coyle. You saw both planes hit both towers, and you saw both towers come down. Tell me about it.
I went to work this morning. I worked for Solomon Smith Barney, and we're located at 7 World Trade, and I'm on the 43rd floor. And we were just sitting there today, and we saw the first plane hit the building. And at that point, I really did not know what was going on. It didn't look like an accident because it looked like it was a direct, that they were aiming it right at the World Trade Center. But then there seemed to be like explosions, so people didn't really know. There was a lot of debris hitting the windows. People panicked, but they stayed put. And originally I thought that...
For the president, we're told that they will also say that the Congress will reassemble in session tomorrow. That they will also say that the Congress will reassemble in session tomorrow in order to pass a resolution of support for the president, a resolution that will call for tracking down and punishing whoever is responsible for all of this. That's the latest downtown. This town, Bob, from one end of Pennsylvania to another, really in a state of shock tonight.
Thank you, Bob. Across the country, Americans trying to deal with the reality of what may turn out to be the worst attack on American soil. We know about the rubble in New York from the Twin Trade Center towers that have come down. We now know that there are a couple of other buildings in the lower part of Manhattan in the Trade Center complex said to be on fire. There is still a considerable destruction tonight at the Pentagon and all around America. We're trying to make sense of the attack as we look at some of the pictures from New York today. We don't have any firm words yet on the number of victims. Of course, the priority now is to treat those people who may be wounded and injured. And search teams are now looking through rubble on a couple of fronts trying to find survivors. But we do have a couple of grim facts from the airlines. After all, there were 4 civilian jetliners involved in the attack today. These are planes capable of carrying about 250 passengers apiece. There were 4 planes involved. And we thought initially that the death count just from the airline planes alone could be upwards of 800 or so. It turns out that according to United Airlines and American Airlines, some 266 people, that's passengers, flight attendants, and crew, have been killed in all of these crashes. And as of yet, there is no explanation from the FAA as to how these security breaches took place. A couple of points about security. It's long been a criticized point of the FAA policy that the American aviation system depends too much on luck and good fortune. The magnetometers you see, the X-ray machines are put there to catch people walking on planes with guns, and some of the screened bags, some of the checked bags, I should say, are screened. But in large degree, we haven't seen an attack like this in the past, most aviation sources will tell you, because to a certain degree, we have been lucky. Now, we've been telling you through the day that President Bush has not been in Washington, but is heading back to Washington at this hour. Bill Plant has more on that for us now. Bill?
Bob, President Bush started his day in Florida, where he was doing 2 education events. One yesterday, he stayed last night in Sarasota, Florida, and this morning he was reading to a group of school children when he got the word. An aide came up and whispered in his ear what had happened in New York when the first plane hit the first tower of the World Trade Center. He finished reading to the children, and a few minutes later he made a statement, and then got on a plane and said he was heading back to Washington. But as it turned out, the president did not go to Washington. Security concerns were paramount here, and he was taken instead to Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana. And on the ground in Barksdale, he taped a statement, which was later played back for us, and this is what the president had to say at that time to the American people.
Freedom itself was attacked this morning by a faceless coward, and freedom will be defended. I want to reassure the American people that the full resources of the federal government are working to assist local authorities to save lives and to help the victims of these attacks. Make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts. I've been in regular contact with the Vice President, Secretary of Defense, the National Security Team, and my cabinet. We have taken all appropriate security precautions to protect the American people. Our military at home and around the world is on high alert status, and we have taken the necessary security precautions to continue the functions of your government. We have been in touch with the leaders of Congress and with world leaders to assure them that we will do whatever is necessary to protect America and Americans. I ask the American people to join me in saying a thanks for all the folks who have been fighting hard to rescue our fellow citizens, and to join me in saying a prayer for the victims and their families. The resolve of our great nation is being tested, but make no mistake, we will show the world that we will pass this test. God bless.
President Bush, that was the videotape that he made outside Shreveport, Louisiana, his second statement of the day. The earlier one, a situation in Florida where he spoke very briefly, had happened about an hour and a half, 2 hours before that statement was made. Russ Mitchell, who's been helping me here at CBS News World Headquarters in New York, has a development and someone to talk to. Russ?
Thank you very much, Dan. And we're here now with Patrick Andre. He works on the 71st floor of building number 2 at the World Trade Center. He's a trading manager at Morgan Stanley. Mr. Andre, thanks for joining us. You were there when the second plane hit. Describe to me what happened.
We were evacuating the 71st floor when suddenly I heard a boom and fire and smoke engulfed the floor, and all the tiles for the ceiling started crumbling down.
The tiles from the ceiling?
Yeah, from the ceiling started, yeah. And at that point, the 2 other co-workers who were with me, we decided to go down the stairs, and yes.
What was going through your head when you felt this?
That I'm making sure that everybody who were on my floor they're out of the building, evacuated, and a repeat of 1993 since I was there the last time.
That's right. You've worked in that building for 15 years. You were there in 1993 during the terrorist attack. Then, let me go back to you going down 71 flights of stairs. How many people were with you? What did you encounter along the way?
There were about 4 people with me at that point, since we were the last one to leave the 71st floor. And in mid-level, we encountered a young lady who was an handicap with crutches and asking for help. And between the 3 of us, we helped her down to the lower floors.
Now, when you got downstairs to the bottom of the building, what did you think? What was the first thing that you did?
That we got some fresh air, and the police, and was a relief, really.
Describe the scene, what you saw when you looked outside.
Fire.
Fire.
From building number 1, and debris, a piece of steel falling from that part of the building, the front part, into the lower ground. Yes, the ground was covered with steel, glass, paper from those floors, yes.
You had to be frightened.
Yes, I was.
Yeah. Describe that feeling. I mean, here you are. You're actually there. We're looking at it. We're looking at these pictures here, which are just horrific. This looks like downtown Beirut a few years ago. Rudolph Giuliani said it looks like it was bombed during World War II or something. What's going through your head? You're in the middle of all this.
Well, I guess, like I said, my primary responsibility was the evacuation of my floor. And before anything, I mean, not to panic, and keep my head on my shoulder and making sure that everybody was out. And that was the primary responsibility that I had.
Your primary responsibility was to get everyone out. Now, what happened? Where were you when the building collapsed? When Tower 2 collapsed?
I was in front of City Hall, between City Hall and GNR Music World.
Which is about, what, 3 blocks away?
About 3 blocks away. And I'm looking up my building, number 2, in flame at the upper level. And then suddenly, I'm looking at the building collapsing like paper.
Yeah.
And that's really frightening me at that point.
Excuse me, Russ Mitchell. Please forgive me for interrupting, but apparently another building in the World Trade Center complex has just collapsed downtown. This is a live photograph of yet another building. Keep in mind that the World Trade Center complex, check me as I go here, please, sir, has 7 buildings total. Has the 2 towers. They're gone.
Yes.
Now, we reported some time ago that 2 other buildings in the World Trade Center complex were in danger of collapsing. One of those buildings has collapsed. There is an unconfirmed report that is building 5, but we do not know that. Other sources are apparently reporting this building 5 in the complex, but we do not know that. What you are looking at, these are live pictures here. We've mixed live and tape, tried to make it clear to you throughout the day what's live, what's videotape. This is live tape, and you can tell it's at least another building collapsed because the density and the amount and frankly, the altitude of the smoke has increased so dramatically in that area. Keep in mind, and we've said this before, we say it again, what you're seeing are high shots. Now, here we're going to show you a videotape of the collapse itself.
Describe that.
Now we go to videotape, the collapse of this building.
It's amazing.
Amazing, incredible, pick your word. For the 3rd time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down. And so therefore the smoke that we were talking about, and keep in mind, there are firemen, policemen, other workers down there working, searching for people in the previously collapsed World Trade Center 2 towers, fates unknown. This is an incredible situation. This has never happened before. in the United States. This is the most serious attack on U.S. soil that's happened since the Civil War, which of course was something completely different. Here on the front edge of the 21st century, and it's a good thing we held off on the confirmation, because we now are able to report with confidence that Trade Center Building 7 was that building that collapsed. Not Trade Center Building 5. Now, Trade Center Building 5, keep in mind 7 buildings in the World Trade Center, 2 twin towers, they collapsed early this morning after being hit by planes. Then this afternoon we were told buildings 5 and 7 were in danger of collapsing. Building 7 of the New York Trade Center, a large building, in most other cities would be one of the largest buildings in town probably. Trade Center Building 7 has collapsed. CBS News correspondent and 60 Minutes 2 correspondent Scott Pelley is on the scene. Scott.
Dan, we were literally at the base of building number 7 about an hour or so ago with a number of New York City firefighters and police officers. At that time, the building was fully involved in flame. There were large panes of glass crashing down into the street. And at that moment, the firefighters told us that there was a good chance that building number 7 was going to collapse. That appears to be what has happened now. I don't know exactly how many stories the building is, Dan, but standing at the base of it, watching it burn about an hour ago, it looked to be something on the order of 50, 60 stories, as you said, a very, very large office building. And an hour ago, there were a number of firefighters and police officers in the area. They were watching building number 7 burn because there was frankly nothing they could do about it. The inferno was huge. So much of the building was collapsing into the street bit by bit that they were unable to do anything with it. And now it seems that building number 7 has finally collapsed, at least the 3rd building to fall in the World Trade Center today.
Scott Pelley in Lower Manhattan. I don't believe Scott Pelley hears me, but Scott, on the off chance you do we know anything about Trade Center Building 5, which is reported near collapse?
Dan, I don't know, but when we were down about a block from the base of the World Trade Center towers about an hour ago. And there was a great deal of concern at that time from the firemen that building number 7 was going to collapse, building number 5 was in danger of collapsing, and there is so little they can do to try to fight the fires in these buildings because the fires are so massive. And so much of the buildings continue to fall into the street. When you're down there, Dan, you hear smaller secondary explosions going off every 15 or 20 minutes. And so it is.
Number 7 World Trade Center once stood. Now you're seeing the building that would have been directly next to it. This brown building in the right corner of the frame was the next door neighbor to the building, which is now just a large puff of smoke. That's a telephone company facility that was directly across the street from what was a skyscraper.
But you were pretty sure when we were talking just a few minutes ago, based on talking to the cops and the fire department, that that building was essentially empty.
I was told that they had done an evacuation, and I had the impression it was complete because they weren't talking about a furious continuing of that. Of course, they had moved people, emergency people, out of the scene, but you still don't know. I mean, there's always a skeleton crew operating there. There was fire trucks and firefighters working from a distance to fight the fires in the rubble in the area. So while they hadn't had the full army of rescue workers that could have been there present, you didn't have that.
George Stephanopoulos. Go ahead, George.
As we said before, we're about 20 blocks away from the World Trade Center site, but we were getting some of the silt and debris up here, this far away from the World Trade Center. Secondly, Peter, there is a much more heightened activity from police cars, dump trucks, and other emergency vehicles now in the area. They're congregating about 3 blocks away and looking to go down towards the World Trade Center. We just saw 3 police cars go by and other cars that were completely covered in dust and debris.
Is Gary Breeze from the Firefighters Association still with us?
Yes, I am.
I'm sorry, Peter.
And I was just asking for Gary, do you know whether or not number 7 had been fully evacuated in the course of the last 7 or 8 hours?
No, not firsthand, but I can tell you that if it was possible to be evacuated, it would have been cleared out. You know, that's one of the first jobs that a firefighter will undertake is getting the civilians out of the buildings. And I think it's reasonable, since they've had this much time, and it wasn't terribly structurally damaged in the initial blast, that they probably got everybody out.
Okay, Gary, thank you very much. And George, we'll let you all go back to working your sources at the minute. The Mayor of New York, Rudolph Giuliani, is going to have another news conference in a little while to now, and there's no person in the city who has a better handle at this point on everything that is happening. He was a little reluctant, understandably, to give some sense of magnitude early on in terms of casualties, but he surely knew this was coming as we did. And while we are waiting for him, take a slight right turn here for the moment and talk to our aviation expert, John Nance. It's actually not a right turn. It takes us back to the very beginning of this day. John, are you there on the phone? John Nance?
Yes, I sure am, Peter. Can you hear me? Yes, Peter, can you hear me?
I can indeed, John. And one of the things that just comes as, I think, a shock to people today is that for the most part, we thought that U.S. airliners were, if not immune from hijacking, were far better able to handle such situations. And we get 3 major aircraft on 2 major airlines in one day. How is it possible?
Peter, I think we've all been aware in commercial aviation that no matter how we hardened up the system against the casual hijacker, in other words, the middle case or somebody who really isn't terribly well organized, we've always known that our vulnerability level remained very high for somebody who intended to commit suicide and who was determined to do a lot of planning to know exactly what to do and how to do it to break in. And I think that's what we have seen today. This is the type of threat that has been our worst nightmare as commercial air crews and the commercial aviation business, because if we tried to harden our system against this, we'd get fewer than 20% of the normal air traffic in the air every day.
What do you mean by that? By harden the system against it, you'd only get 20% up every day?
Well, Peter, we don't know exactly how these people got on board. We don't know what happened, but El Al is a good example. They have not had an incident in a long, long time because they're extremely careful.
The Israeli airline.
Travel with them. Yes, correct. If you travel with them, you are going to answer questions. You are going to be very carefully looked at. They know who they carry, and that's one reason they've been so safe. But if we tried to apply that same level of security to the entire civil air traffic system of the United States, we would cut down the amount of air traffic by, well, down to 1/5, and that's probably being conservative.
Is it your feeling, John, that at the moment, I realize you can't agree to this wholly given what's happened today, that the system is about as tight as the public will tolerate, given the extraordinary amount of air travel we do? That's an issue, right?
I think we can do what we, yeah, it is difficult, but I think we can do what we do a lot better, Peter. But I don't think that basically that we have a situation here in which we can get much more tight.
Now, John, I think it was you, or can you still hear me, John? John Nance can't hear me for a second, but while they try to reconnect us with him, because he's so good on this particular subjects, I think it was John or earlier who said that the modern airplane, the 757 and the 767, were both involved today, are such sophisticated aircraft in the cockpit that they're actually simpler to fly. And so it is clear, John believed earlier, that whomever did this today on board the aircraft itself had to have some knowledge of how to steer a plane into a building, because no one today has been able to believe that a commercial airline captain on a U.S. aircraft would not sacrifice his own life rather than fly his own airplane into a building full of people. John, I'm just reviewing. You back with me now? John Nance?
Yes, I'm back with
I'm
you.
just reviewing this notion you brought up earlier. I'm reviewing this notion you brought up earlier today, that someone who was determined to fly an aircraft into 2 buildings like this, 3 including the Pentagon, didn't have to be an expert flyer to get at the controls. Explain again, would you?
Well, I think anyone who has, in our terms, a licensed pilot, even somebody who flew a smaller airplane, could manipulate controls of a jetliner once it got in the air. The problem is that if you're doing the planning for something this heinous, and you want to make absolutely sure that all of your aircraft reach their targets, you're going to want to put pilots who have some exposure to this type of airplane, or at least this class of airplane, into those seats. And that's why I don't believe that we had anything other than pilots that were put into this position, and probably the air crews I'm speculating wildly, obviously, but I would imagine that the air crews that were assigned to those flights were probably killed very rapidly.
So it would take a minimum of experience, but some familiarity with the cockpit of a 757 or a 67 to do what was done today.
I believe so, Peter, because again, you know, that is what I'm saying. I'm saying that any pilot could get into those cockpits with an airplane in flight and physically pull and push and turn and manipulate that airplane. But if you're planning this and you want to make sure that they do it right and they don't mess it up somehow, you're going to want people who have had exposure to that class of airplane. And that's where I think we may end up seeing this investigation go.
And I actually think, if I recall correctly, that many hours ago you raised the notion, you raised the possibility that someone who did this had some time in a simulator.
There is a high likelihood that if you were going to plan this, again, over a period of time, a year or two, that you could, if you were the planning organization, find a way to get your pilots that you wanted trained into a simulator someplace in the world. There are a lot of 757 and 767 training, or a lot of it available. And, you know, our people train air crews from all over the world, our people meaning in the United States. We wouldn't necessarily have any clue of what was in their hearts or what they were planning to do if they came in the door from a legitimate carrier or even a private operator of a 757, because there are some private ones out there.
Thank you, John. Is there anything else you need to add? Please go ahead.
Yeah, just one other thing. This is an unusual situation, and one of the little flags in this, Peter, at this early stage is the fact that we're talking about only 757s and 767s. That is the only combination of big airplanes that have what we call a common type rating. In other words, if you're rated in one, you can fly the other. The cockpits are almost identical. And that may be of no consequence here. It may have simply been coincidental, but it also raises a little flag that maybe we are dealing with somebody who planned this on the basis of having trained for this type of airplane.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much indeed, which certainly speaks to the point that any number of analysts of terrorism, somebody said this morning, nobody wants to be described as an expert on terrorism today, as analysts of terrorism and terrorism activity, and who try to monitor it around the world as effectively as they can, have said this was today a very sophisticated operation. We do know now, we believe, that about 100 people are believed to have been killed or injured in today's attack on the Pentagon. And as John McCarthy from the Pentagon has said to us on several occasions, there is no guarantee that that is the final number. But currently, the information from the Pentagon is that 100 people are believed to have been killed or injured in today's attack. And you recall that Mayor Giuliani of New York, the closest he has come to giving casualty figures, which he's very understandably reluctant to do, that 2,100 people were injured, 600 taken to hospital, 1,500 walking wounded taken to Liberty State Park, which is on the other side of the Hudson River, actually in New Jersey, where the Statue of Liberty, all this in full view of the Statue of Liberty, and that various hospitals from New York City all the way to Canada are treating people today who have been somehow injured in this. Now, I want to talk to Lynn Scher, who has been following the aircraft all day. That is the American and United Airlines planes involved in these incidents. Lynn?
As you well know, the only video that we've seen of an actual crash was of that second flight. That was the United flight that crashed into the second World Trade Tower. What we're going to show you now is some very crude animation of the first flight. That was American Airlines 11. That's the flight from Boston to Los Angeles that went into the first World Trade Tower. What this is animation based on the track of the plane, data coming from the FAA. You're going to hear Walter Cross, the programmer, describing it.
The flight took an immediate hard left turn due south. The speed initially decreased by over 100 miles an hour and then increased to over 500. And then as it approached the New York area, it slowed to all the way down to about 300 knots. So and then tragically it impacted in the World Trade Center. American 11 was indeed the first flight. We have confirmed that of the two.
And that, again, that was the voice of Walter Cross, the programmer, who put that animation together. What that shows you is this flight on its way to Los Angeles headed due west and then made that very sharp turn. Mr. Cross also told us that there was an indication of some air violence right before that left-hand turn, violent changes in airspeed as the plane went off track to head into the World Trade Towers. On that flight, 92 people, not counting the hijacker. And Peter, I've done some very quick calculations. Of course, all of the planes involved in today's incidents were headed to California. 3 of them to Los Angeles, 1 to San Francisco, 2 had left Boston, 1 from Dulles, 1 from Newark Airport. Total number of passengers and crew, 266 people, not, of course, counting the hijackers. Peter?
Thanks very much, Lynn. And the issue of taking off from Boston and Dulles and all headed for California, John Miller raised the issue before of whether or not, there are lots of reasons, and again we'd be speculating, but he makes the point that aircraft taking off from Boston and Dulles outside Washington to go to California would have full loads of fuel on them, thereby creating a far greater explosive potential without having had to have explosives on board and getting them past U.S. security either at Dulles Airport or at Boston. 266 people on the aircraft alone today who have died in this attack on the United States and on the American people. Now, in our control room, somebody says there is a... Let me go first to Bill Blakemore and then perhaps to Joe Torres of WABC, our affiliate in New York. Bill Blakemore, you there? And I gather you saw number 7 come down.
Yes, I did, Peter. I'm standing right on the West Side Highway. The skyline of the financial district has changed again. Just a few minutes ago, I was talking to some people. I was facing north. I saw shock in their face, heard screams, spun around, and then we just watched the building fall in on itself. I believe we have a little bit of tape here. That's, Peter, it was an astonishing thing because the civilians who were standing around here were all amazed, but things have become so bizarre down here that the hundreds of firemen who were standing around looked at it, felt a bit shocked, but then just said, well, we're going to have even more work to do. Associate producer Lucy Kerrigan had been over near that building just a little bit earlier, and the policeman had told her that they feared the building was going to come down, that they were evacuating people from around it. So that's one little bit of good news, is that there may have been fewer casualties from this latest collapse than there otherwise might have been because they knew of the potential. But it's now still a very hot day here. The search and rescue operation is mounting even larger. There are dozens and dozens of fire trucks backed up on the West Side Highway, police trucks. There are what look like hundreds of volunteers who have showed up, who have been marshaled by the Red Cross, all with masks to avoid breathing in dust, but nobody can go in yet. We're still looking at buildings that are on fire down in the center of the financial district, and it's clearly a great deal of devastation. It's not too strong a word at all. It's going to take a while even to assess how bad it is.
Bill, do you have any idea whether or not other buildings in the immediate area are vulnerable at the moment, whether there's concern about any other building as there was about this additional one after the towers?
Well, from the angle I'm looking at, we can see one other building still on fire, and it seems to be on fire through the length of it. I would estimate that's like about a 30 or 40 story building. The problem for any one of us, of course, is that because of the other buildings down here still standing, which are so tall, you can't get a very clean view of the whole thing from the ground. But there's at least one, and it's clearly going to go on into the night. There's a lot of black smoke pouring out of that building now.
Thank you, Bill. Just we just stay with this photograph or this graphic for just a second. Well, no, there's number 7 coming down. When you think that part of the component of news coverage around the country every year is the excitement and the fun that people get watching an old building being demolished, and they wire it very carefully for days, and it's a very careful operation in order to make sure that a building comes down safely. I think the last one we saw was when they brought down one of the old casinos in Las Vegas. I mean, this is just stunning to see these things come down inside, in the case of the north and south towers there of the World Trade Center, come down within a couple of hours as a result of the structural damage, weakening that was done when these aircraft hit them. And now number 7, the World Trade Center, which is 47 stories tall. We're talking with the World Trade Center north and south 110 stories tall. an eerie experience to be in them at the best of times. They sway in the wind, and people have long had experiences with them. But those, and as Bill Blakemore said just a moment ago, the landscape of New York City has changed one again. And in this instance, it's not New York City, it's not New Yorkers' cities, it's everybody in the country's city at this moment, because this was an attack on the United States, no question about it. Everybody said it all day, a declaration of war, an act of war against the United States. We've had any number of politicians and commentators, us included, who were reminded that the last time there was an attack like this on the United States was Pearl Harbor, which finally induced the United States to get fully involved in World War II. And we're going to go on all day, and we'll continue throughout the night trying to get some grasp of this. What do we know at the moment? The President is on his way back to Washington, and we're not certain whether he's going to be helicoptered in from Andrews Air Force Base, which is tradition, but the security apparatus is concerned, and so he may come in a motorcade. I can't remember the last time a president went or came from Andrews Air Force Base in a motorcade. Even maybe the last time was Bill Clinton. No, I don't even think Bill Clinton at the end of his inauguration went out. But there's another example. And the president wants to speak to the nation. And Linda Douglas reports from Capitol Hill that the leadership in Congress tonight wants to have. You have who on the telephone? I didn't know that. I did not know that. I apologize. Thank you. First time I've heard about it. Judge Webster?
Peter.
I'm sorry, sir. I didn't know you were on the phone.
No, it's been very interesting, and I'm glad to listen.
Thank you, sir. This is Judge William Webster, the former director of the FBI, on the phone, one of the country, and the CIA as well, as my friend John Miller points out. Judge Webster, maybe you could help us understand many things, but at the outset, when this happened today, does this overwhelm the FBI and drive the CIA into some kind of turmoil at the same time?
When it happened today, is that your question?
Yes, sir.
It seemed to me that they responded quickly. The FBI's emergency operations centers were in place. CIA, of course, is going back to its intelligence and see what they had, what they didn't have. I think what you usually find in a situation like that is grim determination to do a good job. I don't think it's any kind of frustration or frenzy.
And as you have watched these events unfold today, and perhaps even talked to your colleagues, your former colleagues in the FBI and the CIA, what's your appreciation of this as a whole event?
Well, it's an extraordinary event, and it brings home what we've been saying about the change of terrorism in the last 20 years, as it moves from fewer numbers, trying to make a political point, to doing extreme damage. This reached a high level of capacity to do damage in that way, and it needs to be addressed as such. When you think about what has happened today and the tremendous tragedy, calamity, it didn't involve nuclear weapons, it didn't involve biological weapons, it didn't involve equipment, artillery, Scuds, or anything. It involved the ability to steal 4 or 5 airplanes and to send them on a course of destruction. That's within the capacity of non-governmental organizations such as the kind you've been talking about.
And do you believe, Judge Webster, because there's a lot of armchair observation today, and I don't mean to include you in that, a lot of armchair observation from many of us, do you believe that this in any way, shape, or form could have been prepared for, if not prevented?
You'd like to think that you could prepare for every kind of calamity, but you also like to think that we live in a society that we're very proud of in terms of the freedoms we enjoy, and the freedoms to travel is one of those. Freedom from violence is another one, to the extent that we can know about it. Knowing is the difficult thing. In my years of experience, terrorism was the most difficult because of the cellular nature of decision-making at the top. Even the people who were in the organization would not know until the last minute what was going to take place. I hope we can develop better means of profiling the kinds of people who could do damage, and I'm not talking about highway racial profiling or anything. I'm talking about looking for people that fit profiles of behavior that would be more helpful.
As I listen to you say that, Judge Webster, I think about Timothy McVeigh. Nobody had Timothy McVeigh down as a profile.
No, they didn't. But if they had...
in Oklahoma City, and many of the profiles we do seem to be the obvious ones. Pick on a member of a developing nation because the nation is antagonistic, or the group because it's antagonistic to the United States. I mean, is this the most efficient way to do it?
No, I think that was just one of the things that we're trying to say, should we tighten up? It's not clear to me that we don't know enough yet to draw any firm conclusions about whether or not people were able to walk on board those airplanes with weapons that pass through the screening devices. We just don't know yet, and we shouldn't draw conclusions about that. But I think we have to be sure that we have done everything we can to know in advance. Getting there before the bomb goes off is the ultimate objective. And it requires a lot of cooperation now internationally. We have to share information with our friends around the world about movements of people who are believed to be bent on violence. It's a very tough assignment, and it's one in which we can see now we're going to have tighten our belts, because I think, again, when the reports of the casualties is finally released, it's going to be a lot more than anybody expected, and probably will be more, or at least approximate the size. We haven't had anything like it since Pearl Harbor.
Judge Webster, I don't mean to make you the target of criticism today. It's not my intention at all. But as I listen to you talk about we got to tighten our belt and our defenses, it's what we hear after almost every incident of terrorism. And I wonder what you think, as you've listened and watched today, what you think more could be done that the United States hasn't been doing up until now that is humanly possible in a free society.
I think we've been very educated and sophisticated in knowing what we needed to do. The counter-terrorist centers that have been formed to be sure that information is properly recognized and passed along to the people. Those are things that can, in an evolutionary way, can be improved. Human intelligence, of course, is what everyone will call for now, and we should have it. But we shouldn't fool ourselves that it's something we can automatically take off the shelf and put in place in terrorist organizations.
At the time that human intelligence, human you call it in your trade, was downgraded as part of the national effort against terrorism, were you supportive of it being downgraded?
Actually, that was before I came on board. It seems to me that we've been trying ever since 1978 to improve, or at least 1980, to improve the quality of human intelligence. And in some cases, we were very successful. I recall the Armenian terrorist incidents in the late 1970s and 80s. We were able to get there and interdict the bombs, one in San Francisco, one in Los Angeles, one with explosives en route to New York, and the other in Canada. We know what we need to do, and in some cases we can do it, but we're dealing with some very, very powerful and sophisticated competition here.
Judge Webster, I'm very grateful you joined us. I'm sorry to keep you waiting, but I have one more question for you. Whenever there's a debate or a discussion about the freedom of Americans and the freedom of movement Americans should enjoy under these circumstances, the director of the FBI is always right there at the center. And there's always a debate, there's always an inclination to think that you and the FBI, you want to make it tougher for Americans to move about because it's easier for you to do your job under those circumstances. What's your message to the American people today about retaining their freedoms in the face of this kind of enemy?
I think the message is that we can't have a pendulum swinging back and forth from repression to anarchy. And I think we've done a pretty good job of finding that center, which Edmund Burke 300 years ago called ordered liberty. Mm-hmm. We need to have liberty, but it has to be one accompanied by order. And professionals are very willing to do their job under court orders and the appropriate procedures. All that they ask is that they not be unduly burdened by restrictions that in times like this get in the way of finding the culprits and bringing them to justice.
Judge Webster, thank you very much for giving us the time. We'd like to hear from you later on, so we're very grateful to you at the moment. Thank you. Two things the judge said,
Thank you, Peter.
You're welcome, sir. Two things the judge says which just leap off the page, John Miller, to me. Clearly, one is the Edmund Burke quote when he talks about liberty. It has to be ordered liberty. And the other, in terms of talking about the capacity of the terrorists today, said there were no scuds involved. There was just the capacity to steal 4 planes.
And we had talked earlier about airline security. How do you get a gun on an airplane? Unconfirmed reports from these cellular phone calls that were made to 911 from one of the flights saying that a flight attendant had been stabbed. Perhaps they didn't have a gun. Certainly, the GAO and the General Accounting Office of Congress and the FAA and airline securities consultants have demonstrated over and over again that if you're careful enough and you plan it, you can get a weapon onto a plane. And they've demonstrated exactly how, which I won't describe here for obvious reasons.
Right.
So this is security that's designed to harden the target, the airplane. Certainly, there's no such thing as total security there. And terrorism, I mean, if you look at this most incredible, unprecedented, historic act of terrorism, it still harkens back to what we see in the World Trade Center, Oklahoma City, the embassy bombings. We talk about the level of sophistication in planning, maybe, but the actual act is usually very low tech. A bomb made of fertilizer and fuel oil, things you can look up and buy on the internet, hijacking an airplane, perhaps even with sharpened instruments. Now, the aspect that there may have been people trained to fly these planes, that's a new wrinkle.
That is indeed.
Certainly on conventional hijacking. I can give you an update from the scene as things are developing there. If there can be any good news about a day like today, the collapse of 7 World Trade Center, the building they were so worried about injuring rescue workers, has freed up rescue workers to now go into the area, and they are moving in groups of 20 and 50 as their teams are designated.
So the principal danger to the rescue and recovery teams has been eliminated.
The biggest danger has literally removed itself. Right. One of the first teams going in is a team of tow trucks, which is literally going to pull rigs that are fire trucks, police trucks that are buried in rubble out of the way so that they can clear a path and bring in other vehicles. And they've requested a number of dogs. Additionally, 100 doctors...
I'm sorry to keep interrupting.
Sure.
Explain why they want dogs.
They want bloodhounds, cadaver dogs, the kind of dogs that can climb up in the rubble with them and catch the scent of people that they can dig for in such a big pile of rubble.
It is a strange name for a specialty, but there are indeed things called cadaver dogs. Anybody who called it the Condit investigation know that they were used in, et cetera. Go on,
right.
please.
100 doctors, 100 nurses are standing by the main police facility that is now the command post for the NYPD, not police headquarters, but an off-site location further up into Midtown, has them standing by waiting for somewhere to send them. And essentially, this long operation, which will be the longest night for New York's rescue workers, has just begun.
And thank you, John. And Cynthia McFadden, I believe, is now at Chelsea Piers, a large sports entertainment complex on the west side of Manhattan, or at least close to it, which, Cynthia, was described earlier as a makeshift morgue. Is that really what it's going to be?
No, it's not, Peter. What they've decided to do here is make this the triage center. We've been told that all victims now who are taken out of the blast site are going to be taken here first. They'll be tagged before they get here, determine what the severity of their condition is, and then once they arrive here, they'll be treated initially and then sent on to other hospitals. I should also tell you that inside this has been described to me, you can see behind me, ambulances. What you can't see probably is that there are probably 200 or 250 ambulances lined up here on the west side highways, waiting. These are empty ambulances waiting to distribute patients or potential victims all over the tri-state area to hospitals. Peter, inside, it's been described, we got a look inside earlier, it really looks like a MASH unit. It's 50 operating suites set up, hundreds of doctors and nurses here to treat the wounded. They have been here, standing here for hours now. There are no patients here yet. The latest estimate is that there won't be any people here for several more hours. What we're told is, and I was just listening to John Miller, part of the problem initially was that when the first rescue workers went in, and we've talked to some of them who have, some of the second wave of rescue workers, the first wave of rescue workers who went in were trapped, many of them killed by the second blast. And so when the second workers came out, many of whom are now here, they wouldn't allow anyone back in the area, which is why there aren't any patients here at the moment.
Well, Cynthia, let me just go a little farther with that. You say 250 ambulances standing around waiting to pull people out. You'd be talking about pulling people out of the rubble at this point. The mayor reminded people across the country there are 170 hospitals in New York City, and aside from St. Vincent's, the principal nearest hospital, which lost, among other things, its emergency power, I think, and lost its gas operating facility at the time, wasn't it, John?
That was Beekman Downtown, or New York Infirmary, that lost its steam power. St. Vincent's then actually had to bear the brunt of this.
And so people have gone directly to hospital. I don't quite understand, Cynthia, the who's going to come to Chelsea Piers until they begin to rescue people, hopefully, from the rubble itself.
Peter, the initial thought, and of course, as you know, we've been to Bellevue today, a couple of other places. There have been hundreds of people at area hospitals, as you note, but they don't believe that anywhere near the full weight of this has yet been uncovered, that there are hundreds and thousands of people who have been injured in this blast, and that's the people that they expect to bring here.
Okay.
St. Vincent's is saturated.
This is a News Channel 36 special report.
Today we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. I have spoken to the Vice President, to the Governor of New York, to the Director of the FBI, and have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families, and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act.
The president brought word this morning of the United States under terrorist attack. From there, it just got worse, with another aircraft hitting the Pentagon and the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center collapsing. This is Alexa Gromko with 36 on your side. We start with an overview of New York transformed into a war zone. Here's ABC's John Berman.
It began just before 9 a.m. American Flight 11 from Boston to Los Angeles crashed into one of the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center. Then, 10 minutes later, the second plane, a United flight also from Boston to Los Angeles, crashed into the second tower. The Twin Towers, a symbol of American economic power, stood wounded in the morning sky. Then, they stood no more.
We saw a shadow, it looked like a plane. Next thing we know, it was boom, boom, and the floor started shaking. And then we saw debris fall down, and next thing we know, we had to get out of the building.
It was like a comet just hit the earth.
Just after 10 o'clock, as thousands of terrified people watched from the streets, the South Tower collapsed. 20 minutes later, the second tower came down. Some 50,000 people work in the two towers at any given time. Evacuations began immediately after the first crash, and many were able to get out. But thousands of people are feared dead. On the streets of Lower Manhattan, it was mayhem. At local hospitals, the wounded started to pour in. A makeshift morgue was being set up on a Hudson River pier. Firefighters and law enforcement streamed to the scene, or as close as they could get. Many firefighters could be among the victims.
Today is obviously one of the most difficult days in the history of the city and the country. The tragedy that we're all undergoing right now is something that we've had nightmares about.
Just as the towers were falling, yet another plane, a United Airlines flight from Newark to San Francisco, crashed in western Pennsylvania. All the flights appear to have been hijacked. Government sources say that on the American flight that crashed in New York, a flight attendant called the operations center saying 2 flight attendants were stabbed and the assailants had broken into the flight deck. The smoke is still rising behind me from where the World Trade Center once stood. Officials say they need to wait until it clears and they know all the buildings around are safe before they even begin a search and rescue. Right now, New York City is a city frozen in disbelief. John Berman, ABC News, New York.
During times of tragedy, many people turn to their faith. Here in Lexington, dozens of churches held special prayer services for people wanting to seek comfort through their religion. Jody Ambrose is live at St. Peter's Catholic Church, where a large crowd gathered this afternoon. Jody.
Alexa, a crowd nearly double the size for a normal noon service. About 50 people gathered at St. Peter's Catholic Church to hear words of healing. Lexington, Kentucky is hundreds of miles away from the scenes of the attacks. but people here aren't far removed from the tragedy.
We just open ourselves and ask God to help us pray.
Thoughts of the victims weighed heavily on the people who gathered at St. Peter's Catholic Church.
And I think there's also that little bit of fear in the realization that it could be me, it could be my family. It happens to be someone else. But if it happened to me, I would want people being supportive of me.
Let us pray.
Many people touched by the tragedy are asking why, and they're turning to the church for answers. They pray for the victims and for the people waiting to hear from their friends and family. Bill Getz is one of them.
I know these folks, you know, some good friends of mine that, I mean, these are guys I worked with for years.
The attack on America has hit home for the people at St. Peter's Catholic Church. As they deal with their grief, they know they're not alone.
If I didn't believe so very strongly in Christ and his teachings and, you know, the good Lord and the power of the Holy Spirit, you know, why believe it if you're not going to do something about it?
And certainly it's a difficult time for all Americans here. The priest here at St. Peter Catholic Church says the attackers robbed us of our security and our peace. And that's definitely the sense that you get when you talk to people inside the churches. Now, many churches held afternoon services and many more plan nightly services. So you want to check with your church to find out if they're planning a special prayer service. Alexa, back to you.
With all the desperate emotion out there, Jody, I'm sure a lot of people will be looking into that. Thank you. The attacks have halted air travel across the country. Within an hour of the World Trade Center crashes, Lexington's Bluegrass Airport was on alert. Christy Runyon joins us from the terminal with more on the standstill there. Christy?
Alexa, it is certainly apparent that this is no ordinary day here. Just to give you an example, this is the loading and unloading zone of the airport, usually one of the busiest sections of the terminal, loaded with cabs and people dropping people off or picking them up, and airport shuttles, that sort of thing. But today, not much at all. Actually, most of the traffic we've seen has been from the police's mounted patrols that have been making rounds here. Of course, even on a normal day, the Bluegrass Airport isn't one of the busiest in the country, but you could be at any airport and it would be much of the same. No planes coming or going, airport staff struggling to reschedule flights, and passengers wondering what's next.
And we are stuck in Lexington. We can't fly anywhere. We're supposed to take a connecting flight to Miami and being unable to do so.
All travelers can do is wait.
Every flight that was bound for Lexington this morning has already landed here, and there won't be any more departing flights until further notice.
Stuck, basically stuck.
The cancellations left many travelers wheeling luggage back out of the terminal as soon as they arrived. Others gathered around TV screens, watching coverage of the attacks, questioning the notion of rescheduling their delayed flights.
I'm a little shaken up because you see all these airplanes crashing where they are, so I don't know.
We are tremendously scared. We don't want to be in the middle of or close to an airport, for that matter.
Airlines are working to put passengers on flights tomorrow, but with no guarantees.
All of our airline partners here are frantically trying to rebook passengers. You can just imagine with every flight in their whole fleet has been canceled within the United States.
Most travelers fully understand the delays and are focusing on tragic circumstances instead of their own inconveniences.
I just send prayers out to the families and stuff, and hope it stops.
The FAA says at the very earliest, flights could be reopened tomorrow at noon. But again, it is still way too soon to know exactly how long the shutdown will last. And even once planes are back in the air, you can expect some major delays. As far as the Bluegrass Airport goes, it is virtually closed. In fact, police are posted at the entrance, making sure that you do indeed have business here before they will let you in. And they do advise that if you are planning to fly, don't come to the airport for your rescheduling needs. Either call the airline's 800 number or use their website. Alexa?
I can imagine a lot of travelers are probably weary to fly anyway, given the fact that 4 planes were hijacked today.
That's exactly true. One of the gentlemen in that piece actually is from Philadelphia, and having heard what happened in Pennsylvania, he said that he was probably just going to rent a car and make the trip on the road.
On road. Thank you, Christy.
You're welcome.
Well, our state capitol has been under close watch since the tragedies occurred. The state police and the Kentucky National Guard are taking every action possible to make sure Kentuckians are safe. Jeannie Lauschie was at an afternoon news conference in Frankfort. She joins us now with the latest information from the governor. Jeannie.
Alexa, the bottom line is Governor Paul Patton wants to assure everyone that the state of Kentucky seems to be in no immediate danger. Even still, extra security has been added to the Capitol. There are state police cruisers parked outside the executive mansion, heightened security throughout the Capitol complex, and federal buildings around the state are also under added security. Despite all of this, Governor Patton wants to try to encourage everyone to go about their daily lives as best they can.
We have, since the very first moments, tried to evaluate any danger to Kentuckians and Kentucky facilities. The state police and the National Guard took those actions that they felt appropriate in the very earliest minutes of this tragedy.
We have no particular reason to believe that Kentucky or anything in Kentucky in terms of state property is particularly at risk. The only thing the National Guard has been asked to do at this time is to place 2 of our C-130 crews on alert for the possible requirement of moving emergency personnel, emergency response personnel, or emergency supplies to either Washington or New York if that should become necessary.
Now, these terrorist attacks came on the last day of the Southern Governors Conference, which was being held here in Lexington. The governors were just getting ready to go into another meeting when they heard the news. Once they learned how serious the situation was, Governor Patton's first priority was getting all these governors back to their home states. At this point, all 7 visiting governors are either home or en route to their home states. Alexa?
Very good, Jeannie. Thank you. Lexington Congressman Ernie Fletcher says America is not on the verge of war tonight. He says the logical place to start the investigation into today's terrorist attacks is with Middle East terrorist Osama bin Laden. Speaking by phone from Washington, Fletcher told us today's attacks will spur congressional hearings into the failings of our intelligence community.
Very tragic day. It certainly makes us aware of our vulnerabilities, which we've kind of known, but it really, I don't think anyone ever expected, such a terrorist act. It is surprising, and we are going to have to find out why didn't the intelligence community know what was going to happen, or at least have some hint of it. And have we just grown complacent because we haven't had any major hijacking in the last few years, and is that the problem? And are we going to have to make some changes at our airports? But it will change, I think, certainly the international community and approach toward terrorism.
Fletcher was at a budget committee meeting when the Pentagon was attacked. He and his wife are now at their Washington home. Mayor Pam Miller was set to introduce the city's new public safety commissioner today when news of the attacks broke out. Mayor Miller expressed her sympathy before the news conference.
I think we're all in a state of shock about what's happening in our nation's capital and at the World Trade Center. So let's bow our heads in a moment of silence for the people that are victims of this horrible act.
Today's string of terrorist attacks is a cruel history lesson for everyone. For some students in the College of Law Enforcement at EKU, it's also a harrowing learning experience. As Greg Stottlemyre shows us, they are learning from an expert.
Your kids will ask you, do you remember that?
It was the only subject in today's fire, arson, and explosion class at EKU.
The investigation, I don't see any way at all where it's not going to be long. It's not going to be arduous.
Instructor Tom Thurman should know. He was with the FBI for 20 years. He was part of its evidence response team at the Pan Am 103 bombing and the 93 World Trade Center bombing.
It's kind of obvious, I'm sorry to say, that a hole has been found, and that hole in the security has been compromised.
By whom? Osama bin Laden?
He is the terrorist of choice right now.
But Thurman says that doesn't mean anything until the proof piles up.
There's all kinds of groups other than Osama bin Laden that can come to the front and say, do they have a capability? Absolutely. Do they have the resources? Absolutely.
Thurman, a bomb expert, is trained to be methodical, analyzing tiny pieces of evidence in a lab. But today's attack is more of a people and paper trail investigation. He says Americans should avoid knee-jerk reactions.
We cannot, nor should we, react to these heinous crimes to lock down the country.
Advice these students got firsthand today. In Richmond, Greg Stottlemyre, 36 on your side.
Tom Thurmond says when a huge terrorist attack happens, the FBI reacts exceptionally fast. There is no pandemonium, just a rush to get organized and get teams on the scene. Well, all of us will certainly remember this day forever, where we were when we first heard the news. I was at Georgetown College to take part in a women's symposium this morning, but as news quickly spread, classes were canceled and a campus-wide meeting was held. I ended up talking to the students about covering how today's events impact us here in Kentucky. Political science professor Dr. Michael Daugherty also talked to the students. He's joining us now with some political perspective. Now, you were a network correspondent, so you've had your share of covering conflict, certainly. The big question on everyone's mind today is who did this and why? What's your perspective?
Exactly. I think that, first of all, I find it very interesting that the federal law enforcement agencies have not yet provided a thorough briefing. We haven't heard any tape of aircraft communications, ground to air or air to air. We haven't seen any surveillance tapes from the airports. We know that that's available. My guess is, I'm quite certain that it's being reviewed by federal authorities. The fact that we have gone this far in the day without that has once again allowed speculation to occur. If you recall, when the bombing took place in Oklahoma City, the first thing people thought was Middle East terrorists.
Exactly.
48 hours later, we learned differently. I think that clearly, as was evidenced in some of the tape that I saw here in networks earlier in the day, a lot of people are looking to Osama bin Laden in the Middle East for 3 or 4 basic reasons. First of all, terrorist acts are conducted generally for highly political and ideological reasons. People take credit early. Nobody's taken credit yet. Bin Laden is essentially under the protection of the Taliban, a fundamentalist group in Afghanistan. And it could well be the case that we know from his past activities with the USS Cole, we know from his activities with the 2 embassies in Africa, he tends not to take credit immediately upon the action. Secondly, there's been a tape circulating in the Middle East for about 3 weeks in which bin Laden points to the possibility, or the probability rather, of another great occurrence. Well, he tends to do that also. He tends to predict the attacks before they occur. And thirdly, it's a very sophisticated operation. It required a knowledge of flight, the ability to fly these 2 aircraft. We know that bin Laden's group has that ability. So there's a lot of evidence that would point in that direction. Having said that, it could well be the case that a domestic terrorist group could have conducted this operation. Why? Because of the level of sophistication, because there was not a claim of responsibility immediately following Oklahoma City. So I think it's very important that we wait, we see what the federal government puts in front of us, and see where that investigation is going before we talk about who and why. I would also like to speak to Congressman Fletcher's comments that you aired earlier.
About not being on the verge of war. I think he probably would be challenged by several people on that.
Well, first of all, I don't think we are. I think that there are many different levels of foreign policy response that will take place. This is an open democracy. It's one of the reasons why we're vulnerable to these sorts of attacks. It's also what differentiates us from the rest of the world in many ways. It's part of what makes America great. And we will move through the foreign policy process in an appropriate fashion. What I found interesting was, and this is the second or third time I've heard it today, the allegation that our intelligence community let us down. I don't think that's true. I think it's very difficult to protect high-profile public facilities from these sorts of attacks precisely because we are an open democracy. And secondly, issues regarding did the intelligence community not do its job? Well, it takes human intelligence, actual operatives, to gather the kind of information you need to stop this sort of activity. We put a great deal of emphasis on satellite intelligence, on technical intelligence, eavesdropping, that sort of thing, but it takes human intelligence to prevent this sort of attack. And if anything, I think the incidents of today will probably reinvigorate that discussion. The near future, I think we will see more asymmetrical or low-intensity conflicts like this one. It's certainly been a subject of study for the last 10 years, And it's really important that we move forward and look at it further.
Dr. Michael Daw here with Georgetown College. Thank you very much. And we may have time to talk to you for a few more minutes a little bit later, so stand by for us. Do appreciate it. The World Trade Center buildings house the headquarters of several financial companies like Merrill Lynch and Morgan Stanley Dean Witter. This morning, the American stock market did not open, nor is it expected to tomorrow. Richard Essex checked with some local banks and stockbrokers to see what effect this tragedy will have on your money. Richard.
Well, Alexa, will this have any impact on our local banks? The answer is no. Your ATM cards will still work, your checks will still be cashed, but it will be a couple of days before you can actually buy stocks.
As a bank, we really shouldn't feel any effects from it and shouldn't affect our day-to-day operations.
Local banks get their money from the Federal Reserve. Right now, the Fed is closed like most federal agencies. Local banks do keep enough cash on hand for 5 or 6 days.
The Federal Reserve shipments have been shut down. Obviously, it's a temporary thing.
The Federal Reserve is expected to reopen on Wednesday. The only inconvenience will be money wire transfers from bank to bank.
Generally, when there's an event of national significance like this, they would close the markets.
Wall Street closed today and is expected to remain closed tomorrow. But once the market bells ring again.
It's a very bad hiccup. It could be a deep hiccup when it actually happens, when the markets do reopen.
In other words, when the markets reopen, expect a major fallout. But not all of this is bad news.
I would expect this to be the catalyst probably for the next bull market, the next true movement up in the market.
There were several brokerage houses that maintained offices in the World Trade Center. Now, all of those companies also have other offices in other cities in case there is a catastrophic event like what happened today. Now, one of those companies is Morgan Stanley Dean Witter. They have an office here in Lexington. We've called them a couple times today. They've answered the phone, so we assume they're doing business, but there won't be any stocks traded for at least a couple of days. Alexa?
Thank you, Richard. President Bush was speaking at a Florida elementary school when the attacks began this morning. To many, he seemed like an easy target for an attack. UK expert and former CIA agent Bob Pringle believes the president was never in any danger. He said it's virtually impossible for anyone to know the president's day-to-day schedule.
You need to have his schedule days or weeks in advance. You know that the World Trade Center is going to be there day after day. You know the Pentagon's there day after day. To hit a target such as the President of the United States, you would have to have very specific information well in advance.
The president's travel information is carefully guarded by the Secret Service and his aides. After the attack, he cut off his public event and for security reasons was flown to an Air Force base in Louisiana rather than back to Washington. Today's attacks didn't come as a surprise to one of the country's leading experts on corporate terrorism. Tom Preston's Versailles-based company predicted this kind of attack on the firm's website at the beginning of this year. He says today shows just how vulnerable this country is to terrorism.
It symbolizes how weak our security has been, how far we must go in demanding greater security. I think life will change because it will be in our best interest that it changes. The real question is, what type of response will this country be able to take to get to the heart of that unknown enemy? And that's a chapter that hasn't been written yet.
Preston says the immediate impact on everyone will be the restricted travel and the tightened security that will go with it. You can build a building to survive earthquakes, hurricanes, and even bombs. Some federal buildings are even structured to survive plane crashes. We spoke with a UK engineer earlier today about protecting American buildings that might be considered terrorist targets.
We have had structures designed for plane crashing into them, basically such as nuclear certain facilities, and but you cannot do such designs for every structure in the United States. It's practically impossible economically to do so.
Issam Herrick said a plane crashing into a building is probably the last thing an engineer is considering when designing a structure. We hope you will help us help those affected by the attacks. 36 on Your Side, National City Bank, and the United Way of the Bluegrass have organized a relief effort. Donations can be made out to the Bluegrass Disaster Response Fund. Drop them off at any of the 26 National City Bank locations in Central Kentucky. Proceeds go to the American Red Cross and the Salvation Army. For more information, you can call 859-233-4460. Security is at the highest level tonight at the Bluegrass Army Depot. Barricades have been moved into place at the entrances to the 15,000-acre installation south of Richmond. Guards are now shouldering their weapons, and security checks at the gates have been intensified. Depot spokesman Dave Easter tells us routine shipments of ammunition have been suspended. He says the depot is awaiting instructions on any shipments that may be made because of today's events. 70,000 rockets filled with deadly nerve agent are stored at the depot, along with a wide variety of conventional ammunition. Kentucky is home to 2 military bases. Spokesman George Heath says the U.S. Army base in Fort Campbell has increased its security posture, but otherwise is conducting business as usual. Fort Knox leaders have declined comment on activities there. The National Guard is not on standby, nor have they been activated as of yet. And amid the heightened tension felt throughout the nation, one building here in Lexington stood firm against terrorism while continuing to operate as normal. The federal court building downtown stayed open. In fact, federal marshals across the U.S. have been contacted to reinforce security in large cities. A note to Lexmark employees: second and third shifts should not report to work tonight. The Toyota plant in Georgetown is closed tonight. Production employees should not report to work there. Fayette Mall in Lexington has also closed all stores tonight as well. We've also learned that some high school juniors from Lexington's Sayre School were in Washington, D.C. for a field trip. They are okay. They're planning to return to Lexington on Friday. An attack of this magnitude can compromise an adult's sense of safety and raise a lot of fears for kids. Michelle Rausch talked to a counselor earlier today with some advice when it comes to talking to your kids about this.
Vivid pictures you can't escape. Images that test our sense of safety and trust.
Affects our level of safety, how we feel about our world, our level of anxiety and fear and anger, just a wide range of very intense feelings I think that people are going to have.
Lane Veldkamp is a professor at the UK Department of Psychiatry and also has a counseling practice. He says it's important, if you're a parent, to be aware of what your kids may be feeling. No matter how young they are, they may not understand what has happened, but kids are perceptive and may sense some anxiety from you.
Families should talk about this openly. The dinner table is a good place to do that because it's a place where everybody comes together. Parents don't want to deny that this is going on. They don't want to try to keep this from their children because I don't think you can keep this from anybody in the country.
As the impact of the attack sinks in, so can some problems with sleeping, aggression, concentration, and anxiety.
Best thing we can do now is talk to each other, I think, and not just stuff these feelings inside.
This morning's devastating turn of events has people across the country talking. Although individual responses are unique, everyone we gathered reaction from said they never imagined something of this magnitude happening.
It's very sobering and unnerving, and it feels unprecedented to me.
My heart breaks for our country, and you know, it's time for our country to hit our knees and pray.
I go back to Pearl Harbor and certainly can remember that, and there was an immediate reaction.
Afraid to say there'll probably be a war over it, you know.
It's sad. I don't know what to think about it. It's got me scared.
Find out who it is and lay them to rest.
Another note to tell you about: the Lexington Legends are taking no chances. Game 3 of the South Atlantic League Championships tonight in North Carolina will not be played. The Legends were scheduled to play the Asheville Tourists tonight. We expect a decision later this evening on when that game will be played. All major league games were postponed. Day 2 of the September sale at Keeneland was canceled after this morning's terrorist attacks. The sale will continue tomorrow as scheduled, but everything will be pushed back one day for the rest of the sale. So all of the horses that should have sold today will sell at their regularly scheduled time just a day later. A busy morning at the Lexington Herald-Leader. Reporters, photographers, and staff members immediately went to work producing a special extra edition. You can see it coming off the press early this afternoon. A 2-page spread showcases first pictures from Ground Zero in New York and Washington. A special section of the Courier-Journal hit newsstands this afternoon. Tomorrow's issue will also contain a special section on the attack. That is it for us for our special edition of News Channel 36. We're going to take you back to ABC News in New York. Thanks for joining us.
This has been a News Channel 36 special report.